Aloha, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to our third session of MUA Hawaii. For those who joined us at our first few sessions, welcome back. And to those who are new, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. Our topic of the night is the roadmap for homeless and workforce housing, and I am so honored to introduce our expert panelists tonight. First, we have Christine Kemp. She is the president and CEO of Avalon Group, a real estate development and brokerage services firm she founded in 1999. With over 25 years of industry experience and leadership, Christine has gained recognition as an expert in real estate and finance issues. Mahalo, Christine.
Aloha.
Next, we have Kali Watson. He is the president and CEO of the Hawaiian Community Development Board, a nonprofit established in 2000 with the express mission of supporting and promoting housing, community, and economic development projects that benefit families living in the Hawaiian Home Lands and communities throughout the state of Hawaii. Mahalo, Kali.
Hello.
And next we have Ikaika Anderson. He is the former chair of the Honolulu City Council. He has dedicated over 2 decades of his professional career working for the people of Hawaii. He is also presently a candidate for lieutenant governor. Thank you, Ikaika. Just wanted to wish a warm mahalo to all of our attendees who are joining us tonight. We want to remind you to please utilize the Q&A function to ask questions to our panelists. This is an interactive dialogue series, and we appreciate your involvement as it helps to shape the conversation that is taking place. And also a friendly reminder, our webinar will be recorded and uploaded on our website afterwards. So I would love to take advantage of the hour we have tonight and just dive into our conversation. And we'd love to just jump into the topic of workforce housing. So let's start with Christine Camp and have her talk about her ideas, what she wants to work on, and what she sees happening in Hawaii right now.
Thank you, Kathy. As an active developer, we're always looking at opportunities to meet the demands, the unmet gaps, and filling them. And what we find is that there is a gap for workforce housing in Hawaii. If there is such a demand, which we all know there is, why aren't we building more? And so I'm always left with trying to answer those questions to solve or help add homes to the whole equation. And what I find is that Hawaii is not unique in the sense that our planning processes add to our cost. What makes us unique is that we're very, very protective of the lands that are available for developing housing. So what I'd like to see is more people saying yes to housing and finding opportunities for them. There are several bills, I would say a lot of bills that are available for housing and ideas that are floating around in the legislature. But I'm not sure if we need new laws versus if we need more resolve and implementation at the administrative level and making sure that housing is developed. Stanford Carr this morning shared with me and a bunch of folks that there's been over 80 years of history in Hawaii in trying to solve the affordable housing crisis. 80 years. And yet we're still where we are, which is we don't have enough homes for the people who live here. So what I'd like to see is more opportunities for developers to squeeze down the process in which they're faced with to reduce the cost of delivering homes for our residents. Sorry,
Mahalo, Christine.
Thank you, Kathy.
Kali, could we have you share some insights with us, and we'll also have you share your screen at this time.
Thank you. As you know, my name is Kali Watson, and I've been around a while, I guess. And in the past, I headed up the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands. And can you see that screen? Can you folks see that? Are you folks able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, one of the things that I had the opportunity to participate in was being a director of the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands. And one of the things that became very, very apparent right off the bat was the long waiting list that was in place. At the time I was a director, there was about 7,000. Today it is 28,000. And so we're kind of at the stage where how do we address that in an approach that would be effective? I was very glad to hear the House Speaker, Scott Saiki, say that they're considering making 600 million available. I think that is a step in the right direction if used appropriately. Unfortunately, in the past, the department has focused in on just a single family residential, but there's other ways to do it. And doesn't necessarily mean just using whatever limited land resources we have to inundate it with single family houses. You know, in the years that I've been a developer in the past 10 years, we've done a variety of different projects that have resulted in large numbers. And you know, we've done some high rises, Halava View apartments, the Kulana Hale Phase 2, as well as the Kiwalo apartments. And the good thing about this particular approach is we're able to leverage funds in order to access other funding sources, such as low-income housing tax credits, hula May bonds, as well as the rental housing revolving fund. And by doing that, we're able to get the cost of construction under control, whereas we could proceed with the projects, but more importantly, generate units that are affordable. And we are able to access these fundings when we commit to a long-term rental approach. Usually we go over about 61 years where we restrict the rents to a rent that's extremely affordable. And so by doing that, we access these funding sources that we leverage, and we are able to put out the numbers that we can. One of the nice ones we did initially when I left the department was the Nanakuli Village Center. In that one, we actually did a 48-unit project that cost us about $14.5 million. It didn't cost the department anything other than making the land available. And so we're able to use the low-income housing tax credits and a variety of other sources to build this housing project, basically primarily 3-bedroom units. And the average rent for each unit was about $350 because we were able to get some federal subsidies from rural development. So that we were able to build at a very reasonable price using these government subsidies, but more importantly, offering the units at a price which people could afford. 95% of the tenants over there are from the homestead community. In addition to that, as part of the Nanakuli Village Center, we were able to get Kamehameha Schools into developing the Kalani Ho'okaha Cultural Learning Center, which is running. It's a $10 million project. It allows the community as well as other members in the Waianae Coast to use the facilities to conduct, various community activities. In addition to that, on this DHH property, which is about 12 acres, we also put in some medical clinics, the Waianae Comprehensive Health Center, as well as the Reno Fresenius Clinic, using new market tax credits, as well as GIA funds for the backbone infrastructure. And then in the front, we have kiosks as well as various retail outlets, which provide not only jobs and opportunities, but business opportunities for the community. So when we talk about homeless, it's important to provide the housing, but you need to, in our view, create a village center. We have all these different activities and services available to the people out there. The Nanakuli Homestead community, which is one of the largest homestead, has over 1,000 homestead families that live there. And so these kind of services are very, very critical. So when we are looking for solutions, think of a village center rather than just a straightforward housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kali. Just a question, were you going through your slides earlier? Because I think we only saw the first slide.
You're kidding. Okay.
Yeah, we're just making sure. We thought you might have been doing an intro. If you're able to kind of just reopen it again and show us the photos that you were referring to.
Okay, let me try that. Share screen. There you go. That, and then share. How's that? Can you see that?
Yeah, and then are you able to maybe press down on your computer and just kind of go through the slides? Because we see the first one and
See that one?
we see that one. Can we see the other one?
Are you still on the first one?
Still on the first one.
Well, I'm not wondering what's happening there. How about we do a new share? And
I have to say though, Cully, the descriptions that you gave were spot on. And at least for me, helped me to visualize exactly what you were explaining.
see anything other than the front?
Can you press play from start?
How about that?
There we go. Yes, now we see it.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
Do you
my
mind
partner.
giving us a quick overview again, one more time? Just
Yeah, that's Chris, my partner. The Kenna development. I partnered up with a mainland outfit, and our nonprofit Hawaiian Community Development kind of leads the development team. Then this is the other projects we've done: the Halava View, the Kulanahali and Kapolei, as well as Kiwalo. And this is the in Nanakuli, the Nanakuli homestead, the Hale Makano Nanakuli. And you can see the village center, which shows renal clinics. In the back is Kalani Ho'okaha, the Kamehameha Schools, Cultural Learning Center, and then the housing in front. Then this is the one we just finished in Maili, which is a 52 unit. We have a Kupuna project in Moilili that's 105 units. That's under construction. These are a couple others. One in Halava, that's 302. Talking about outer islands, we have a project in Kihei, which is a 3-phase, 223 units. The county has been working with us. They provided about $9 million in subsidies to help in assisting that. That's a variety of kupuna housing, family, as well as mixed use with some commercial. We're doing a new one in, this one is on DHHL land, the Uluvehi. That's a 40 unit where this is going to service the guys on the waiting list, which is kind of nice. While and we're going to work with CNHA and Hawaiian Community Assets and the Catholic Charities to prep people on the waiting list to become homeowners. We're doing another project in Chinatown, the Kekaulike Senior Apartment. That's about 50 units. And then we're combining that. We're putting up a hotel right adjacent to it. That's about a 240 unit. So there, we're trying to revitalize Chinatown by, not only building senior housing, but also putting in a hotel. And then this one is in Pearl City. That's 122 units. We're working on Kahuku Village, old Kahuku Sugar Mill site. We're going to put in a renal clinic. We're not going to do any affordable housing, but we're going to do some nice other commercial stuff. And then on Kauai, we're doing in Lehui, we're going to do a 96 unit affordable housing. Again, using the light tech or low income housing tax credits. And again, these types of projects I do are more for the lower end type families for rentals. We're also going to try and switch it out where, like how we did in Kapolei, where you rent it initially, then after 15 years, you convert to home ownership. And the tenants in the conversion become homesteaders. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we've been doing. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's very informative.
Mahalo for sharing that, Cully.
You are.
As you were talking about your desire to see the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands shift into actually providing potential rental housing. Likewise, I'm hopeful that that's something that the department will provide more of. I know that local developer Stanford Carr has worked to make a dent in providing rental housing to Native Hawaiian families within the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands. But with transit-oriented development in particular along the city and county of Honolulu's rail line, it would be great to see TOD maximized and DHHL become a solid partner with the city and even with private developers in being able to provide some vertical rental properties that would be available for Native Hawaiians versus just simply looking at the single family model. As you mentioned, Kali, looking at the multifamily model and possibly even looking into more rentals. Because for whatever reason, there are many on the DHHL waiting list that just are not able to get into home ownership at this particular time. So to maximize our efforts to help the most number of people possible, the most families possible, I think it would be helpful for state government to look at expanding the offerings within the department. And when you're shifting to homeless families, looking at the Kauhale model, the first Kauhale model actually turned into being an unofficial Kauhale, now called Hui o Mahiai Aina, that's in Waimanalo, and unofficial because the proper permits weren't necessarily obtained, and the construction and the management of that property has been rather unorthodox. But I must say, I must emphasize, it's been successful in taking dozens of formerly homeless people from the outskirts of Waimanalo Beach Park on state property and relocating them to a state-owned Department of Land and Natural Resources property. When you had two branches of government, when I served as the council chair at the time, working with state government, with the office of the Lieutenant Governor, in getting the Department of Land and Natural Resources to be a partner in bringing government together and being able to bring these services to the people in Waimanalo who were formerly living unsheltered in tents. And I think that's a solid level of services that can become available when government will partner together. And it can be done. And what's beautiful about that Kauhale model is we've shown that it could be duplicated. The first official Kauhale project opened recently, as many know, in Kalailoa, likewise with government providing the land. And you have a number of military veterans who were formerly living houseless who are now going to have housing opportunity there. But we can duplicate this across the state in those communities that are interested in hosting these types of villages. Anti-Twinkle Board looking to do this on the west side of Oahu is another opportunity where this could work. But Kali, again, I loved what you were saying regarding the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands and opening up new opportunities there. Would also like to hear from Christine as well in looking at opportunities on the ownership side. Oftentimes, Christine, as we've discussed in the past, much focus is put on those earning 80%, oftentimes below area median income, which is extremely important. But you had also mentioned, and you've shared your advocacy many times in ensuring that we also provide housing for those young professionals who need kokua too, but oftentimes just aren't able to qualify for the different assistance that is available.
Yeah, thank you, Ikaika. Exactly. So I think in a healthy community where it's sustainable, we have to take care of the young people who are starting their families, the middle class. I think of the middle class being squeezed out. We have, obviously, we need all the help we can get in building rental housing like what Kali's doing. We absolutely need it, and the government has to help. And then, of course, there's all the luxury housing that's going up, and we need it because that allows us to add and build more housing. But what's happening with the middle class? They spend all their time getting educated so that they were upwardly mobile, and they're supposed to be here to take care of our future, but they can't afford to buy their own home. They're too busy raising their families. They don't quite have enough tenure at their work to be able to go out and advocate for themselves when policies are being made. And yet they need all the help they can get in getting their home. And this is where I feel that we're missing the picture. We need to do more of, and we can't look to the government to be funding everything. We can't. I just heard this story, I read this story that says that the government should be developing housing for everyone. That is absolutely not the case unless we want to be burdened by taxes for all of us. We want the private sector to be building housing. And the way to do it is making sure that we look at policies that delay the production of housing. I really would like to look at Koa Ridge as an example. That project, when I was working at Castle and Cook, we were planning it back in the early 90s. And yet, of course, 2 Supreme Court challenges later, they're finally built and delivered. 3 years ago, it was a start, right? And for every home that they came up with, there was 10 to 20 people waiting for it. And the home prices were not as affordable as we would have hoped. But if you're waiting 20 years before you deliver the first house, of course, the housing cost is going to be higher. So what I'd like to think about, and at the policy level, even at the state, where you can make some umbrella policies for all the counties, is to make sure that we don't forget the middle class, who should be given all the tools necessary to build the nest egg, to be able to buy their first home. And so we have to build at all levels, and we can't forget the working class.
Could we dive into examples on how private developers can use private money to develop housing at the price that residents can actually afford?
So private developers obviously will use deposits, if you will, as well as their own funding to do the pre-development work and make sure that they have sufficient funding to develop the project. The larger, the better for the community, because we'll have more homes. However, the larger the project gets, there are more risks, and therefore they have to pre-sell these homes. They have to spend a lot of money upfront, including environmental assessment, archaeology, traffic reports, and all these costs are borne upfront as a risk factor, and land acquisition costs, the holding costs. If the government can help subsidize those periods in exchange for building more housing that's at achievable levels, we can deliver those homes. But it really comes down to reducing the timelines. And the funding available there right now for workforce housing, there isn't really a lot of funding available for workforce housing for sale. There's a lot of funding available for rental housing, but not enough to meet all the demands. And there's some encouraging signs at the legislature to pass bills, but Ikaika knows this. Even if you pass bills, if the administration doesn't move beyond the action, doesn't matter how good of a bill that you pass, even the laws may pass, it has to be implemented and interpreted the right way. I use an example of Maui again, where 201H project, you were supposed to be exempt from everything in exchange for delivering affordable housing. They did that, but there was a Supreme Court challenge that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, the interpretation is that you're not exempt from all the laws. And therefore they had to go back to the drawing boards. That's what causes housing not to be built. So Ikaika, you can share that's all the stories of all the funding you made available and it wasn't implemented. It wasn't a priority. It really is about executing on those priorities.
And unfortunately, oftentimes when the government will approve a housing project or consider approving a housing project, you'll have a community that for whatever reason doesn't want it in the particular location where it's being envisioned. Going back to the Kauhale model for the homeless folks, the reason that I championed that first project being in Waimanalo, not only was it in my council district, but I'm a Waimanalo resident myself. So I did want to show our community that, hey, this is something that we should accept, give us an opportunity to do it well, and show that this model can be duplicated and that we can help our people. Because ultimately, those people aren't just those people, they're our people. And many of the folks who are living outside of Waimanalo Beach Park, I mean, let's face it, they're Waimanalo residents who wanted to stay at home in Waimanalo. The best way to help those folks was to be able to provide them with a structured environment and to bring the wraparound services in, and also to give them a sense of community, living in a village where everybody had to pitch in to help out. And everybody had different skills. everyone had something to offer, regardless of your station in life. I mean, even the kupuna who weren't working had the ability to relate to children, because many of them were aunties, uncles, and grandparents themselves, who would be able to offer childcare services, nurturing services. That helped a lot. So some of the working parents would be able to go and take care of their needs. We had farming capabilities, growing their own food. Auntie Blanche McMillan, who runs that program, is doing that right now, growing their own food, providing income and job opportunities. All of that is there in that type of a concept. But I do believe that government at the executive level needs to consider streamlining the process so that we can ensure that we're building additional units and that the units are reaching the local population who they're desired to serve. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to build the necessary number of units to help our local people.
And let me add to that regarding the effort to build more housing. I think the idea, and I got to really strongly emphasize the importance of the $600 million initiative that Scott Saiki put out there, and also the fact that the companion bill was also signed by a majority of the senators, besides the majority of the representatives. So I think it's going to be a very likely situation that that bill will pass, and hopefully the governor will sign it. And so we're talking about $600 million that's going to be infused and available to DHHL to deal. And let's face it, 1/3 of the homeless out there are Hawaiians. So if you can house those guys, then you've just dealt with 1/3 of the homeless population. And to me, a very important portion of our population out there by providing housing. But it's important that, they use that money in the most effective way. Have a variety of types of units out there besides the single family, the high rises, the townhouses, the kupuna housing rentals, a variety of situations, but also recognize that we're not restricted to the corpus or the DHHL land base of a little over 200,000. There are a lot of, and me as a developer in the private sector, we're looking at other areas that are available for acquisition. There's nothing to prevent a department from acquiring new lands that they can then add to their land base and develop. And what better thing to do to develop in an area that's already has a lot of the amenities, whether it's schools, parks, or whatever, commercial centers, and make the Hawaiians part of that development. So if they can use that 600 million to not only do developments, but acquire lands, use it to leverage and use it for reserve funds that could be used combined with tax credits, bonds. The department has a bonding authority as a government entity, similar to like how it's been done in California, where they can authorize bonds. Right now, there's a limited amount of bonds that affordable housing developers can use. It's not to prevent the department from doing the same thing, accessing and issuing bonds or facilitating the sale of bonds to subsidize and assist in the construction costs for all these different developments. If the department not only uses that, uses NAHASA funds, which is the HUD block grants, uses RD and some of these other funding sources, the infrastructure money coming down from the feds, and collectively use it to incorporate it not only on their existing lands, and they have some really good lands. In Kona, one individual was asking about Kona, what's happening in Kona. The department has lands in Laopua that's just sitting there. It has all the backbone infrastructure in, but there's no development other than urban housing is putting one in, which involves a rent-to-own approach, which I think is an excellent way to address those that cannot qualify for those large mortgages. You become a renter, after 15 years, convert to a small mortgage, and you become a landowner. So the department, if done right, can really address not only the homeless, but more importantly, its waiting list. So it's an exciting time, and I hope all of you out there will support this bill, these two bills that are going through the legislature that will generate significant, to me, it's a game changer for the Hawaiians as a race. If we can start dealing and create a foundation where families can be in a safe and protected environment in the form of housing that's nice, centrally located, accessible to educational facilities, jobs, etc. We're going to really reduce all these high-end, problems, socioeconomic problems that are plaguing the Hawaiians today. And I think it's exciting. So the time is now. Hopefully the legislature will step up, as well as the private sector, as well as you as a community, to make this thing happen. So it's exciting, I think. So you might not look excited, but thank you.
What an exciting time. That 650 infusion is something that I agree with you. It can be leveraged. If you look in terms of, like, as a developer, when you look at $650 million, say that's 50%, and you can borrow 50%, because in real estate, that's what you do. You can borrow against the real estate to make it last longer or create a bigger project. The 650 can be leveraged to be 650, 1.3 billion, $1.5 billion of real estate development projects. And the impact that it can have in the Hawaiian community would be just fabulous. But I want to talk about, Kali, so it's one thing that having the law that allows DHHL to go ahead and acquire land and develop it. The issue here is not so much of course, the funding, number one, but the second is related to the 343, right? The environmental laws. It says that if you're using government funds, you have to go through the 343. Chapter 343 is a significant impact to anything that's related to government funds, government lands, if you're acquiring property on behalf of the government. That process can take up to 3 years. And so I just finished a 4-year term on the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines that represents 13 states. There are 11 Federal Home Loan Bank system banks there. Their whole job is to create funding for housing developments, and also 10% of its profits every year goes to funding housing projects. Do you know how many projects that Hawaii was funded? 0 last year. And the year before, 1. Did they end up using the money? No, because they couldn't get the permits in. At the federal level, what we look for is shovel-ready projects. And unfortunately, housing projects in Hawaii, whether it's fantastic projects like things that Kali does, we just don't have the processes that will support the funding to stay with us. We keep losing funding that's allocated to Hawaii because we're not able to fix the laws that delay our permitting. So I asked that what we should be looking at is Chapter 343 to really help the process.
No, I agree wholeheartedly regarding that 343. In fact, we're kind of in a situation now with our Chinatown kupuna housing and the hotel, where we've got to go through the CA that is very time consuming. There's limited resources over at the entity that reviews the things that have to be reviewed. So that causes a delay, anywhere from 9 months to a year. And fortunately, unfortunately, time is money, and if you got carrying costs, as in this case, we're actually purchasing the land, so we got to pay that note while we're waiting. And so not only the very expensive costs of pre-development, when you add the two, it's hard to find developers like us that do these affordable housing projects because there's a tremendous risk. And that's why I'm so excited about the DHHL. The land is up front, and there's not any real costs involved there. So that's a huge hurdle that is eliminated. But this review process under the 343, that really does have to be addressed. Although one of the fortunate things about DHHL property is, especially when you bring it into the inventory, it's exempt from these entitlement and rezoning requirements, which is really nice. So that couple years process of getting the entitlements are eliminated by doing a DHHL project. So I think that 600 million, there's going to be a lot of shovel ready in a fairly quickly time of projects that really can address that waiting list. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully whoever the new governor is, as well as the lieutenant governor, Ikaika. We want you guys to really kick butt, as we had talked earlier, and get those guys moving. Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more. That it says permitting, chapter 343 refers only to new construction, and there's a question there. No, it's not. It's related to anytime you use federal, state monies, city monies. So anytime we want to support subsidized housing, we have to address the environmental impact statement, and that's related to traffic, environmental, everything that's related to the project. The issue is not so much that we shouldn't do them. The issue is that the state agency that handles that, it adds to the process of permitting at the local level. So you have permitting at this county, at the Big Island, Kauai, Maui, and Honolulu. We have 4 counties. They all have their own permitting processes and ordinances. But in addition to that, you have to go through the state agency, and that adds, just for an environmental assessment, not a full drawn out environmental impact statement. It could take about a year, and maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million. Why? Traffic impact statement alone. I mean, traffic impact study could cost anywhere between $150,000 to $250,000. Soil studies can cost anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000. So you start adding to it these projects in smaller sites, and you start having to do these types of reports for very small projects or projects that have very thin margin, in fact, nonprofit at that, just breaking even. It's very difficult to have more projects that are shovel ready. Developers like Kali Watson and his team, they come in and they advance these monies in anticipation of funding that may become available through low-income tax credits. Unfortunate part of it is that we're a population of 1.4 million, and our tax credits are based on the number of people we have in the state of Hawaii. We keep losing people who are moving to the mainland. We lose those tax credits as well.
No, those are good points, Christine. And I saw a question here as well regarding the assets that Hawaiians have, and with all of those dollars in assets, why Hawaiians continue to be homeless. I strongly believe it's because the assets aren't directed to where they need to go to. As we've been talking about, the focus at DHHL for decades has been on single family homes. And for whatever reason, many on the DHHL waitlist simply can't qualify, whether it's because of income, whether it's because of credit, or whether it's because of simply not knowing how to manage money. Many just can't qualify. And I've long wondered, being a Honolulu City Council member, why the department hasn't shifted to providing rental housing. And when you have rental housing, then you can also provide those services that teach folks about managing money, train folks to be able to acquire jobs that have higher incomes, and these other social services that can become available when you provide these rental housing opportunities. Kali, you're a former Hawaiian Homes Commission chair. What I would like to see in that particular department is someone who understands land use, someone who also understands development, and who has a record of building and actually providing units, and knows how to navigate that process so that we can provide additional units. But let's also start providing rental units. And let's look at transit-oriented development to do this. It can be done. Using the dollars that the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands has to acquire properties along the rail lines. Let's partner with Kamehameha Schools. Kamehameha Schools own some property in those transit-oriented development areas as well. Yes, let's utilize some KS lands, DHHL dollars, OHA dollars, and make these dreams into realities. It can be done if you have the right people in the right positions, and they're willing to put those monies to use to service the most people. It's really a shift in current ideology. Rather than just looking primarily at single family housing opportunities, let's see what else we can do to provide housing to those folks who that single family model, for whatever reason, doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that Ikaika, you've hit it on the head regarding kind of integrating some of the other ali'i trusts. I mean, the Nanakuli Village Center is a good example. It's on DHHL land. We got Kamehameha Schools that went in there, took out a lease for the Cultural Learning Center, the Kalaniho'oka Learning Center. And that was one of the first times, they've actually done that. They've done a bunch of preschools and other, when I was at the department, we did one on the Big Island in Keaukaa, as well as one in Maili. So they've gotten a little bit active. On Molokai, we did the Kulanoivi, which was a multi-service center using about 5 different of the different trusts working together to provide various type services relative to their particular institution. The thing about it is we need more of that. We need more activity in the homesteading community, but we also need a partnership, so to speak, among the elite trusts. Kamehameha, for example, a good example is the lands in Kaka'ako on the Makai side. You have DHHL with no lands there, but you have OHA with about 30 acres that they're stuck because of a legislative mandate that they can't build residential units on there. That is ridiculous. This is a Hawaiian lands, trust lands for the benefit of Native Hawaiians. And what is the #1 priority for the Hawaiians? Of course, income generation is important, but housing, whether it's workforce housing in such a great location, whether it's student housing next to the medical school that could easily accommodate that. You also have Kamehameha over there with significant lands that are also limited in use. Now, if those lands were conveyed to DHHL because of their automatic entitlements, they're no longer subject to those restrictions. So there has to be this collaboration and partnership between the different elite trusts, including OHA and DHHL, to get stuff done. And unless that's happening, they're really minimizing the potential benefits that could be generated for these different trusts. So I hope in the future, and I see some really great leaders in the different Hawaiian organizations. It's migrated from mostly elderly haole guys as the leaders in power to, we got a lot of educated Native Hawaiians leading these organizations. So they can kind of get together, collaborate, work together, partner up. The Hawaiians could be the biggest developers without a doubt in the history of Hawaii, based on the assets that they have accessible to them for use. You add the 600 million in there, and you start maximizing the entitlements that are accrued to each, as well as following their trust mandates. A lot of good things can happen. So it's going to be exciting times. I think if we have the right leadership in the right places, whether it's the governor or the lieutenant governor, you guys push Ikaika. If you get in, we have some good things happening in Hawaii.
And it's slotting the right people into these positions. And it would be my request that I at least have a hand in working with the community in choosing the next nominee for the Department of Hawaiian Home Lands, who also serves as not only as director of the department, but as chair of the Hawaiian Homes Commission, so that we have someone with those different areas of expertise, who actually knows how to deliver housing, who actually understands the government process. Because if you don't have those various levels of expertise across the board, not going to be successful in ultimately providing the units that are necessary, and providing units to people who, for whatever reason, the single family home ownership model doesn't work. We've tried that, not working.
Thank you, Ikaika. I do have a question on what type of policies do you foresee government introducing in the upcoming years that will spark some change into the way things are being done?
Is that for Ikaika? Ikaika, that's you, man.
Yes, that's for you, Ikaika.
As we were talking about earlier, I think that government certainly can look at streamlining some of these processes so that the developers aren't spending all this money going through processes that take 9 months, sometimes in excess of 12 months. Perhaps state government can look at doing these different processes and undertaking those costs of providing those different processes that need to be gone through, so the developer isn't paying for it, thus adding to the cost of housing. I'd also like to see for state government, for example, start to provide land and eliminate that one hurdle, which is the cost of land ownership, land acquisition, which then gets passed on to the folks who are either renting or who are buying the project in question. So those are at least two of the areas where I see that government could help. One, helping with streamlining the process, using public dollars to go through those processes so the developers don't have to pay for it, thus passing it on to the homeowners and the renters, and government themselves providing land that could become available. There was one project in Kailua that I was talking about with then state representative, now state senator Chris Lee. Small project, but one like the Kahale initiative, I believe that could be duplicated. The city owns a parking lot in a commercial area of Kailua town, right adjacent to the Cinnamons, the popular Cinnamons restaurant, and right across the street from the Lanihuli senior rental project. The city owns that property at Lanihuli as well. Senator Lee is extremely interested in the state providing some of the dollars to redevelop that area into rental housing, if in fact the city would provide the land, and then working to also provide a community park on that same property, coupled with parking, that you'd have parking, housing, retail, a community park, all in that one area, would provide necessary housing units, just like Lanihuli provided more than 30 years ago, that are still available today for our kupuna. Small project, yes. But again, it's one that could be duplicated. And this is an effort that I would like to see come forth and come to fruition. But again, it's also government providing land. Can be done.
Could we also talk about some of the roadblocks that potential home buyers are facing right now in the market? And maybe either Christine or Kali could also chime in as well.
I think for home buyers, when they are trying to buy homes, they're competing with people who have cash. And most of our working class, middle class people here need to finance their purchases. And they need to have qualification, and sometimes they may even need down payment assistance from various programs. So I'm a big advocate for ensuring that there's sufficient time the locals have to buy homes before it goes to the general public, meaning to the investor class. The owner occupants should be given that chance. So we have that with the condominiums, where 50% of the condominiums have to be reserved for owner occupants for the first 30 days of the marketing. I think we should set it aside all for owner occupants. Then if anything is left over, it should be made available to investors. And then we should give the owner occupants slightly more time. And if there are any voucher systems that are available, because there are down payment assistance. For example, Federal Home Loan Bank provides down payment assistance to Hawaiians for up to $15,000 per home. Not a lot, but it can pay for closing costs. And for those who are making 80% and below, there's $7,500 of down payment assistance. And if we can cobble together some of those and make sure that the policies are available at the state level that allow it to not expire until the projects are completed. And a lot of these high rises, they don't get completed for 2-3 years. And we'd like to make sure that there are programs that are supportive for the locals who are financing their positions to lock in their rates, help buy down their rates, as well as down payment assistance being available when the project is completed. I believe that the quality of living in our community means we have to support those who work here. That I believe that that quality means that they should have an opportunity to pay rent to themselves for sustainable future. So with that, I just hope that we can have policies that could have down payment assistance. There were loan programs available through Hula May when Kali, when your administration was in power, they had Hula May loans available for the first-time home buyers with priority for residents here. And so I'd like to see that, low interest rate buy downs, down payment assistance, and giving time for the local buyers to be able to properly compete. Those would be good things for us to do as a community.
Thank you for sharing that. A lot of locals often share their concerns about being priced out of paradise, and they have this narrative in their heads that there are foreigners coming in and buying homes, and as a result, this is affecting the housing market. Do you think that contributes to the housing shortage, or are there other factors that weigh in?
I think what's contributing to the shortage is really the cost of development. And the risk. Risk happens when you don't know whether you're going to get permits or not. When you acquire a site to plan and spend millions of dollars before for years before you see the first dollar. If we can minimize that risk, we can reduce the cost of housing. So certainty is one that we need to see more of in our permitting process. Just as an example, my 270 unit project in Hawaiian, which I helped some of the tenants who are renting. I gave them $15,000 deposits, 15% of their 2 years of rent that they paid towards their down payment. Plus I lent them money to buy their first home, but they could have bought it without any of that support. Cost of interest for that project was $111,000. $111,000 is just the cost. So I have to add profit to that for our investors. Can you imagine if I didn't have to go through that process and it was able to build it in 2 years instead of 7 years? $111,000 is what it costs in interest and carrying cost to get those projects built. So I'm using real life example. I believe that if we can simplify the process, it will be a lot less expensive. It's cost.
And Christine, could you explain a bit how that program that you offered worked for those folks at your Hawaii Kai project? Because there were many folks who came out and said that they felt that that process was one that would be a positive if we could continue with that. How did that work?
It worked for those who really wanted to buy and they tried their best, but they couldn't qualify for enough of the loan. And I couldn't give it away below the cost. So we helped in that aspect. But, a developer who did that went bankrupt. Peter Savio, when he did that, he lent too many second mortgages for the down payment for a lot of these first-time home buyers. And a bulk of those borrowers didn't pay back. And so there was a bankruptcy. So I'm not sure if that's a viable option. We were able to do it because we had the time to do that. And I just happened to have great investors who were willing to work with me on that. But I think at the state level, if you're able to, one, provide funding that is a revolving fund to allow for down payment assistance, renters could buy and pay themselves rent. If there was supportive policies related to financing where the state can help buy down interest rates to allow them to qualify for mortgages, because we know interest rates are going to be going up, right? It's not a matter of if, it's going to go up. And I sit on the bank board, Central Pacific Bank, and Federal Home Loan Bank, and they all anticipate it's going to happen this year.
Right.
So what's going to happen is it's just going to exacerbate the qualifying program for workforce housing. Those who make not enough to reach the real luxury housing and not too much to get the support of the rental housing. We need to help them. And so if we can come up with programs where there's revolving fund where they can borrow from there or have state guaranteeing a portion of their loan so that they can borrow and be a homeowner, that will be really helpful for our middle class or building a middle class in Hawaii.
And again, Christine, if government can assist with both streamlining that process and helping to subsidize the cost of going through that process, because of course, we don't want communities to feel like they're being run over and have no say when a project is proposed for their neighborhood. We certainly don't want that. But at the same time, we want to ensure that there is some assistance for going through that process so that we can navigate through it. But so the cost of going through the process doesn't get passed on to the renter or the homeowner, thus increasing the price of the housing unit, and we haven't made any progress in solving the issue.
Exactly.
That's great. Thank you, folks. We are reaching the end of the hour that we had slotted for tonight. Does anyone have any final thoughts they want to share regarding this topic tonight?
Well, first, I would like to thank Christine and Kali very much for sharing this hour with us, what they've worked on in their respective careers, what they feel that government from an executive level can do to help to deliver additional units. I'm extremely hopeful that our next state administration can look to provide more affordable rental opportunities for our DHHL beneficiaries, start to partner with different counties across the state in looking for new housing opportunities that can be provided with government lands as well as with county assistance, where the two levels of government come together, much like how the Kauhale initiative was born, and that we can involve our communities to ensure that the housing opportunities that we're bringing forth solve the issue at hand and are workable and acceptable to the communities that we want to provide them to. Because if we don't have the community buy-in, it's impossible to get this done. It just doesn't happen. So Christine, Kali, thank you folks very much. Would also like to thank the folks who've joined us on this Zoom presentation this evening for spending some of their valuable time with us to talk story.
Let me just add my 2 cents to the group that's listening. I think it's very, very important that we have the right leaders in position to move things along. And I think Ikaika would be one of them. And so all of you out there, support the guy, not only in voting for him, but also financially send him some kala that he can have a viable campaign. Mahalo, Ikaika, for inviting me to this community dialogue. Thank you.
Kali, appreciate your manao, as always. Mahalo nui ko manao.
Yeah, Ikaika, the reason why I support you is that you get it. And that's why I'm happy to support you. It's for the working class and the middle class. I really want you to win so you can do good by them.
And oftentimes the decisions that government makes aren't popular. I learned that through my service on the Honolulu City Council. So many of the decisions that were in front of us, the right decision was not the popular decision. But we have to work with all stakeholders involved. And typical local style, I've always felt, is best to talk with people. Sit down, talk story, everybody have an opportunity to come to the table and to share their mana'o. And the end goal is everybody walking away feeling that they walked away with a piece of something, part of their concerns addressed, rather than everybody walking away with all of nothing. And we really haven't done anything to address the issue. So I'm hopeful that as we move across the state, we'll get to talk to more people and we'll get to bring more experts together, because really any elected official is only good as the people that they can attract to come to step forward, to share their mana'o and share their ideas and to bring and offer their expertise. So I look forward to continuing to work with all of our experts in various fields across the state. But Christine and Kali, you folks are certainly that in your respective fields. And really, really mahalo nui to you both for spending some time with us tonight.
Thank you.
Mahalo everyone for joining us tonight. Just a friendly reminder, we will be posting this video online and it will be uploaded on our website at ikaikaanderson.com. And also next week, we will continue our dialogue series. So stay tuned for our emails coming forward. Mahalo and have a great evening.
Ahui ho.
Well,